What happens when the most heavily defended U.S. base in the Middle East is suddenly saturated by nearly 20 Iranian ballistic missiles? More importantly, why do some reports claim catastrophic casualties, while others insist there were none at all? The truth lies in how air defense systems like Patriot and Thaadi were forced to respond in seconds, and how the outcome triggered one of the fastest major U.S. military operations in decades. This isn't just about missiles and hangars, it's about shifting deterrence. So how did the strike actually unfold? Before we move on, I would like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Why did some of the most advanced American air defenses in the world light up as though war had already begun, only to let several missiles find their mark? That question ran across screens in Washington and Doha within minutes of the first explosions. The barrage started with a salvo of Shahab and Sigil ballistic missiles fired from inside Iranian territory within an extremely tight time span. Nearly 20 launches arced into the upper atmosphere, their courses splitting as multiple warheads separated and entered the site of radar stations tied into Qatar's defense grid. For the men and women sitting in dark control rooms just outside Udeid Air Base, it looked like a full-scale warhead storm with dozens of glowing tracks rushing toward their command screens. Civilian neighborhoods in Doha felt the pressure wave first. Windows of high-rise apartments shook. Storefront glass shattered in places as far as 20 kilometers from the base perimeter. Plumes of smoke were seen curling skyward, while social media lit up with images claiming fires near runways. These immediate impressions clashed with official statements released hours later. The Pentagon spoke of limited disruption and almost no injuries. Local news outlets instead pushed sketches of ambulances racing toward base entrances. The sharp divide between perception on the ground and carefully worded military reassurances created a fog thicker than the desert haze that night. At the technical level, America's three-tier shield kicked in exactly as designed. The first layer, THAAD, looked to intercept at high altitude, firing interceptor missiles that slammed into several Iranian projectiles before they re-entered. Next came the Patriot PAC-3 batteries, engaging the re-entry phase as the sky above Doha streaked with brief burns of interception attempts. Finally, the last line, CRAM rapid-fire cannons, chattered against whatever slipped past both higher levels. Operators had seconds to decide which tracks to prioritize. In one control trailer, the system displayed dozens of flashing arrows. Each represented a missile fragment, possibly carrying a high-explosive warhead. Fingers hovered over authorization keys, officers making split decisions about which threat to eliminate, knowing some would never be touched before impact. What filtered through to the outside world depended heavily on who told the story. Reuters dispatches cited at least partial damage to storage facilities. Xinhua reports implied broad devastation, with entire fuel depots claimed destroyed. Independent monitoring groups published crude satellite imagery suggesting limited but visible scarring near hardened shelters. The truth may have rested in between. Estimates circulated that the defensive net achieved an interception rate close to 80%, which sounds impressive until you calculate every fifth warhead slipping through. For a base storing fleets of aircraft and sensitive command systems, that gap was enough to raise alarms. European media added another crack in the official line. Le Monde reported that a geodesic dome on the western side of Al Udeid appeared to suffer significant structural impact. Yet Pentagon spokespeople insisted the facility remained fully mission capable. That phrase sounded more like reassurance than detail, and analysts quickly speculated that the building in question might have housed advanced communications nodes, not just an empty shell. If true, it meant Iran had managed to bruise the centerpiece of American regional logistics, even if the damage stopped short of crippling. For Washington, the outcome sent a troubling social signal. The shield performed admirably under immense stress, but it looked imperfect. The public saw smoke plumes and rattled neighborhoods, not sterile intercept percentages. That hint of vulnerability applied instant pressure on decision-makers. Preventing more salvos meant sending an answer Tehran would find undeniable. And that answer would take form under the name Operation Iron Vengeance, a global show of American reach ready to crush Iran's most guarded assets. What does it look like when the United States activates a strike network that spans 3 continents in less than a single day? Operation Iron Vengeance was not drawn out, not signaled in advance, and not left ambiguous. Within hours of the Iranian barrage against Udeid, the order moved through the chain of command. Coordination began simultaneously in Gulf command centers, in European forward hubs, and in American carriers at sea. The goal was clear: cripple Iranian nuclear infrastructure hard enough to shake confidence in Tehran's ability to shield itself and make the message impossible to miss. The first stage of planning came down to more than just target selection. Natanz and Fordo, the most guarded facilities in Iran, were burrowed beneath mountains and surrounded by layers of radar and missile defense. To reach them meant moving fighters across restricted airspace and drawing in assets usually used in full-scale war scenarios. Pilots strapping into F-35 stealth jets knew their task depended on invisibility. F-15 E-Strike Eagles carried heavier payloads, but for them survival depended on brute speed and electronic shielding. The Americans faced a problem Iran had prepared for decades. These were not open compounds that could simply be bombed on a first pass. They were hardened deep beneath the earth, surrounded by defenses on alert. Supporting units extended across the Gulf skies. KC-135 tankers orbited quietly at standoff ranges, refueling wave after wave of fighters to keep them aloft for the long routes in and out. EA-18G Growlers began emitting at full force, jamming radars, confusing Iranian command centers, and forcing local air defense units to switch frequencies almost blindly. From below the surface, submarines deep in the Arabian Sea loosed volleys of Tomahawk cruise missiles. These missiles flew terrain-hugging routes, slipping under radar horizons, crossing hundreds of miles before slamming into air defense nodes and communications centers in Iran's coastal regions. The attack unfolded in rapid succession, cruise missiles striking first, clearing some pathways. Minutes later, stealth aircraft sliced through the gaps, targeting radars, power substations, and radar-guided gun positions. Only once defenses were sufficiently suppressed did heavier bombers drop in low to release GBU-28 bunker buster bombs. Within about 25 minutes, a complete spectrum of weaponry had slammed into a variety of targets, from hardened centrifuge halls to tunnel access points carved into rock. The scale was not about one or two explosions. It was about sustained precision across dozens of separate facilities, each chosen to maximize structural damage without wasting munitions. Inside Tehran, leaders worked quickly to seize back the narrative. Supreme leader statements framed the retaliation as an attack on Iranian sovereignty, not on nuclear capacity. The IRGC broadcast messages promising that the era of hit and run is over, vowing further escalation if needed. But counter-narratives spread just as fast. Analysts abroad pointed to satellite imagery showing power outages and smoke rising from mountainous regions around Fordo, though hard confirmation remained scarce. In the information war, both sides pressed differing claims, leaving ordinary citizens struggling to parse what had actually happened. For viewers, the impact is obvious. This response was not only retribution, it demonstrated a coordinated, multi-domain effort meant to alter Iran's thinking at its core. Every flight path, every electronic burst, every cruise missile was part of a larger statement. The narrative now moves beyond explosions and physical damage. The true test becomes whether deterrence itself, built on capability and credibility, can actually endure once both sides have fired in anger. The strike and counterstrike showed American defenses could block most threats, but not all of them. Even a few missiles slipping through had outsized effects, creating pressure for a response. Each hole in the shield became an escalator, raising risks for both sides and leaving leaders little choice but to answer force with force. Deterrence in practice is more than weapons. It is how alliances hold together, how enemies perceive restraint or resolve, and how uncertainty itself gets managed. So what do you think? Was Operation Iron Vengeance a stabilizing warning, or the first move in something far larger?